Today on the Reaching Higher podcast, we're honored to welcome Luke Mickelson, founder of nonprofit Sleep in Heavenly Peace, an organization built on a simple but powerful mission of no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. I'm host Aaron Strout, and today I'm thrilled to be able to bring you this farm kid from Idaho turned into purpose-driven leader. And as we get into the show, you'll see Luke launch Sleep in Heavenly Peace after learning that children in his own community were sleeping on piles of clothes instead of beds. It's really tragic if you think about it. What began in his garage has grown into a global movement with over 400 chapters across the U.S. and 4 different countries, delivering hundreds of thousands of beds to kids in need. Featured on Mike Rowe's Returning the Favor and recognized as a CNN Heroes finalist, Luke embodies his philosophy of humans helping humans. His story is not only a masterclass in service, leadership, and impact, but I dare you to get through this episode with dry eyes, I should say, because it is definitely a touching one. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I do. Luke, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here today and really looking forward to our conversation.
Aaron, thanks for having me, brother.
I'm happy to have you. And so a couple of things, and I'm going to give him his flowers. I was telling Luke up front that I've had a lot of guests on, and he actually reached out to me, and he's the first person that's reached out to me cold, because we did not know each other before this, that I was so blown away by what he's doing and his approach that I was like, I have to have you on the show. So excited that we get to do that. And then the other thing I was letting him know that I watched after I wrote the questions, and we'll cover it in a question, but Mike Rowe, who's famous for the show Dirty Jobs, he did or is still doing a show called Returning the Favor. Luke and Sleep in Heavenly Peace are on that. And after I watched it, I was like, I'm not sure if it's not going to get dusty in here by the time all said and done, because I'm going to put it in the show notes, but I would highly encourage everyone to go and watch it. It's 20 minutes and it is just like feel good and will help reinforce the message that we're talking about today. So
thank you.
With that said, I've been trying a new format. Literally, today is my first day. I just got back from doing a panel at South by Southwest, which is an interactive conference. And one of the things we did was these flash questions up front. It's just something to sort of get the juices flowing.
Sure.
1-word answers and 2 sort of frivolous and 1 a little bit heavier, but we'll get started and then we'll dive into the Sleep in Heavenly Peace and all those good things. So the first one is if I can only watch one genre of movies going forward, and only that genre, it would be blank.
Comedy. For sure.
Comedy. Okay. I have a feeling this is going to be a regular theme, especially for those that are doing heavy work and need probably that relief in their lives.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. My perfect flavor combo is blank.
Moose Tracks. I don't know what
Moose Tracks
combo that is, but I know it's got like the little Reese's Pieces cup with chocolate swirls, and it's my favorite ice cream and anything that's got Moose Tracks name on it, it's mine.
So that's funny, like bonus points for that, because that is, I think, like 2 or 3 or 4 things. And I hail from Maine originally, and I believe you're up in Idaho. And I think these northern states that do have moose have created these types of flavors. And so I love that that's one of your choices. I did find out
there's actually an Elks track, by the way.
Really?
I've only had it once, and I think the only difference is it has, if I recall, I've had it once, it's been a while. I think it had nuts in it, and I don't like my ice cream with nuts, so I'll just stick with my Moose Tracks.
Yeah, no, that's a good choice. Solid choice. All right, this last one, which is a little bit bigger than a bread box, but the world would be a better place if X.
I think it'd be a better place if we all really were just honest with ourselves. I think, I know there's supposed to be a 1-word answer, but I feel strongly that, a good portion of life is just trying to understand who we are as individuals. You can't understand who you are if you're not honest with yourself, which I think is like the hardest thing to do on the planet, right? Especially when you get called out on stuff that that you do or don't do. And, it's not to get emotional about it or get hard, if we can learn to just be honest with ourselves, then you won't be offended because you already know, And so, I think we would all live together very well.
Well, and that one is, I know has to be more than a 1-word answer. And so you did keep it pithy. And I love that as a option, because it is hard to do. It's probably one of the hardest things we can do with ourselves. You seem like you do an amazing job doing that. So let's get into the questions. And so in doing my research, and this is always helpful when you have major publications or media outlets that have done a little bit of the homework for you.
Sure.
So I unearthed an interview you did on CNN back in 2018 And in the interview, you talk about learning about a young girl in your hometown named Haley. Haley was sleeping on a pile of clothes on the floor that resembled a bird's nest. I mean, this breaks my heart, and actually seeing you, and we'll get to the Mike Rowe thing, give the beds to the kids. It's like, ugh. But it inspired you to build a bed modeled after your own daughter's bunk bed. Walk us through the specific moment when Haley received the bed and why that was a tipping point for you.
It's a great moment, and I tell people, listen, you can watch a video, which I encourage you to watch any videos, if returning the favor is nice because you got Mike Rowe and you get to see his reaction. And this is what I'm talking about when I can show you videos, I can show you pictures and talk about it, testimonials all day long. But when you're in the room with a child, usually hiding behind mom, and they're receiving a bed for the first time in their life, right? There's an emotion, there's a weight there that you just can't describe. You're watching little Johnny sitting behind mom and there's all these people in their room making all sorts of noise and racket and bringing in all these stuff. And then all of a sudden, like Haley, they realize, oh my gosh, these people are bringing me a bed, and they come out from behind mom and dad, right? And their apprehension turns to appreciation. And then they start grabbing drills and slats and pillows and helping us out, and it's just amazing. And then it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they want to go to bed because they've never had one, you know. And we always sit down with them and, just tell little Johnny or Susie and say, listen, there's two things I want you to know. Number one, this is your bed. It's nobody else's. It's not your parents. It's not your brothers. It's your bed. And these people here, you don't know who they are, but they love you enough. They built this bed for you. And I think that's really important because these kids, not having a bed seems simple on its face value. But when you really sit down and think about it, and when you like go through what life would be like, certainly as a young kid, not having a bed, man, there are a lot of things that emotionally, physically, mentally, that kids can struggle with simply because they don't have a bed. And so when you're sitting in that room and you're seeing this child act like it's 10 Christmases all at once, right? And like in my situation where Haley went up and actually hugged and kissed the bed. I mean, kissed the bed. Are you kidding me? Like that's how emotionally charged this is, and then you sit down and, you're taking it all in, then you look up at mom and here's a single mom. And I was raised by a single mom too. 6 years of tears just pouring down this lady's face. I knew what those meant. I mean, I've witnessed them myself of fear and frustration and struggle and hurt and pain. I mean, all of these things just going down her face in the form of tears. And I remember right there, Aaron, I thought, you know what, I didn't realize it at first, right? I'm just bringing a bed to a child who needs to sleep good, right? But it just painted a picture for me. And I realized, yeah, this is way more than just a bed. It's more than just a good night's sleep.
Well, and like I said, I that really hit me, especially watching the video, and we will get to that more in a second. But this is a good segue into the next question. So, you started to do this as like a little side hustle,
Mhm,
just out of the good of your heart,
mhm.
doing it out of your garage. You started around Christmas time. You ultimately quit your full-time job, trading your traditional corporate success for a movement built on hope, hammers, and heart. What was the most difficult part of walking away from the steady career, and how did you manage the fear of the unknown?
Well, I'll start with the second part of that first. Luckily, I was married to a good woman. We're not married anymore, but we're really good friends, and she believed in me, and she believed in what SHP did for me personally. No one on the planet but her and I really knew the struggles that I was going through internally, and that was kind of the hard part. I had a great life, good job, good family, I was coaching and doing all sorts of great stuff. But just internally, I wasn't satisfied with who I was, and sleep in heavenly peace filled that. It brought passion to my life that I'd never felt before. I mean, I'm a farm kid from Idaho, right? I love hunting and fishing and college football on Saturdays and do all this stuff for 35 years. And then the minute I saw Haley, the minute I saw that situation, I was sitting in that weight, right, of emotion. It all changed. None of that mattered to me anymore. I mean, the thought of building beds for a couple hours a night with my kids to build Haley's bed, right, to solve that problem, oh, that's well worth my time. Right, well worth my time. And so, it changed me there. And I knew way back then, like To solve child bedlessness, when I didn't know how big it was, I do now. I knew it's gonna take more than just a farm kid from Idaho, right? I knew this is gonna have to be solved by other people in my communities. And with that all being said, making the decision to leave my job, that's a hard one. I'd actually called and talked to another bed building charity, the only other one I knew that was in North Carolina, and talked to, I believe his name was Michael. Anyways, he had made the move where he had stopped his job and did his, but I think he was fairly successful, right? I think he was almost retired too. It was scary, it was, but I didn't look back. I picked up another job fairly quickly. I got paid about half as much, but that didn't matter to me anymore. And it wasn't like, this is going to sound bad, but it wasn't like I believed in SHP that was going to provide a source of income. That it was never about that. It was just about the need that I found out was not being solved by anybody, and how terrible the need and vast it was. I think anybody should have or would have said, "Okay, yeah, we're going to do as much as we can." And I'm just one of those guys, Aaron. I'm a hyper focused, all in or all nothing type guy. I think that comes from my sports days and a small town living. You just jumped in and did it. So it was a hard time, but it also wasn't hard. It was a hard decision, but it also kind of wasn't hard. And I was just grateful my family supported me, my friends supported me. Mike Rose shows up and supports us in a way that really boosted us across the nation. And we'll get into it, I'm sure, but that was the megaphone that really announced what needed to be announced, and we were just ready to be able to grow as fast with it as we needed to.
Yeah, well, you brought up the sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but I was shocked by finding this out, and the fact that roughly 3% of children in the United States don't have a bed. 3%. And when you think about 330 million people that live in this country, right? And I think somewhere around 30 or 40% of them are children. And then you do the math, like that is a ridiculous number of people. So how do you combat this hidden nature of poverty in seemingly middle to high income areas where I think everyone just assumes, like, even if you live in a trailer, you live in a small hut, like, of course you have a bed, but you encounter these people, day in and day out.
Yeah. That was the shocking thing to me, right? When I first heard about it, it was shocking enough, going, kids sleeping on the floor? You gotta be kidding me, really? We'll take care of that. No problem, right? I got the Boy Scouts, we built a bed, we delivered it, blah, 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 problem solved, boom. Well, the one thing that I wanted my kids to experience, because I had kids, I had a 1-year-old, and then I had a 7 and a 10-year-old. I wanted them to feel the joy of service, to give back. It was, time we had did service, but this particular service event that we did with the Boy Scouts meant a lot to me. It rung my bell. I don't know why. And so I wanted my kids to experience that. Plus, it was Christmas time and they were begging me for presents. They knew I wasn't going to get them, right? So I wanted them to feel the joy of giving back too. So building a bed wasn't the point. It was the service. Now, I didn't know child bedlessness was a problem. I was like everybody else probably listening right now. Kids don't have beds. I mean, that's a real thing. Well, when I built this bed and had no idea what to do with it, and we put it on Facebook, buy, sell, trade as just a way to find some kids, that's when, as you coined the term, unearthed child bedlessness, it was rampant. And then when we decided to be a nonprofit, a year later or so, I was like, okay, like any entrepreneur business guy, let me go find someone that's doing this and pick their brain and see what they're doing. That's when I discovered there was nowhere in the country except that one nonprofit, Beds for Kids, which I thought was a cool name, way across the country. That was it. And then another thing happened that kind of shocked me too was I started getting calls because we'd build beds and we'd share on the public, and then we'd get more applications and more people wanted to help and we'd share more. It was just compounding, right? And all of a sudden I was getting calls from agencies like Child Protective Services, CASA, foster care, all these agencies that work with these families. And I was like their favorite guy. Like, and it didn't realize, or I didn't realize until one of the social workers said, Luke, you don't realize, like, getting a bed for a child for these families is typically the hardest thing to do. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a bed, right? They're all over the place. They said, no, it was easier to get a fridge or TV or whatever for these families than a bed for a child. And then I realized, well, you put two and two together. Yeah, these agencies work with other agencies. And when there's not another agency, yeah, then they're so well, as the term goes. And so how can you, when you learn about that kind of stuff, how can you not even jump in even?
Yeah, I mean it's profound, and I guess just to demonstrate sort of how big a thing this has become, you started this family Christmas project to give back to this local family in your garage, and you've now grown this into a global organization with over 400 chapters, and I'm sure maybe more than that now, and 350,000 plus beds delivered. I mean, that's really crazy, right? Like that you have
Yeah.
to feel like this is a thing and this is something that I'm not just doing local, which is great, right? We should take care of our people locally, but to really expand that into something so much bigger has to feel really good.
Oh, it feels great, and I did wanna comment too, the 3%, it's funny where that comes from. There's no national statistics whatsoever. Those statistics only come from Sleep and Heavenly Peace, and we're no statisticians, I'll tell you that right now. But we know it's greater than that, and I'll give you an example why. Right now, as you and I talk, Aaron, and this fluctuates high and low around 10,000 fluctuation, but there's 150,000 kids on our waiting list right now as we talk.
Wow,
150,000.
that's a lot.
And it's a ton, right? But I'll put it in perspective for you. We only cover 28% of the United States. So when you think about that, there's over 70% still don't even know we exist. So if we're at 28% and 150,000 kids, I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that math. It's a pandemic that I call that people don't know even exists. It's right underneath their nose. It's across their street, and that's why I love coming on these podcasts. And I'm so grateful for having to come on because you can't fix what you don't know. And I was the same way, And when people get involved with Sleep and Emily Peace, at least initially, I think sometimes they're like, let me find out how bad this problem is. Sure enough, we train 50, 60 chapters a year, and I'm part of the training, not as much as I used to, but I'm part of the training now. And I hear it all the time. I had no idea, and it didn't take long for me to do a little bit of research in my own community and realize, holy crap, this is a problem.
Are there any states or geos like now that we have the platform to be able to shout it out and chip away? Is it like Alaska? Is it, Arkansas? Like where are there any states that stick out that you're like, I really would love to have a chapter here or there?
Oh man, our mission statement is no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. We just want our town to be everybody's town. And it's really interesting. Mike Rowe, CNN Hero, Good Morning America, some of these big national media experiences that I've been on have helped us produce or be the megaphone of this problem, and we were able to get chapter presidents from that, what we call first generation chapter presidents. Right now, because we have so many, there's more chapter presidents that come to us through the experiences they have locally. Right, hey, my friend is part of this crazy thing called Sleep on the Peace. He builds beds. I'm going to go to their build. A couple hours later, he comes back to his hometown, starts a chapter. That's how a lot of our chapters start, because they realize, like I said, they don't know child bedlessness is a real thing. And so they want to jump in, they want to help. And that growth is something that we really haven't proselyted at until recently. We're starting to go into some cities that, through social media where we don't have chapters. But it really takes a special someone with a big heart and a real big desire for helping kids to join this movement, and we encourage everybody, obviously. But it's so averaged. I'll give you an example. Pinehurst, South Carolina. You know where that's at? I mean, that's like golf PGA Mecca. I mean, you know what I'm saying? We have a chapter there. I mean, one of the richest counties probably in the country, and we have a chapter there. It just goes to show you, child bedlessness, it doesn't understand economics. It doesn't know geography, race, religion, politics. It doesn't know any of that, and it doesn't care. The only thing it knows is hardship, heartache, hurt, these things that cause these situations. And let's be real. These kids are in these situations not because of their choices. Sometimes not because of anybody's choices, just rotten luck, but it's certainly not because of them. And so, if that's something that we can help out and give them a boost up as a local member of their community, heck yeah, we're going to do it.
Well, again, bless you for doing that. I mean, it makes me think I'm definitely going to be a more a vocal advocate, and I'm handy and would love to do some of this. So you may see me signing up. I have a few things I have to get done first between now
Sure.
and then. But anyway, it's definitely intriguing. I do want to dive into a little bit of your own personal philosophy. So, you've had this opportunity to do this amazing charity work. You've been doing it for a while now. One of the things that you pioneered is called humans helping humans. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? But how does this approach differ from traditional charity models? And why is community involvement so critical to its success?
Great question. First of all, when I started this, I didn't know how bad the community needed another nonprofit, or not, excuse me, how bad the community needed to find something that they can get behind, right? I think what I've learned is there's millions and millions of great people out there. They want to get involved. They want to help. They want to do something good. They want to make a difference in their lives and other people's lives. They just don't know how, right? And sometimes some nonprofits that they donate the time to, which that nonprofit needs, right? But the experience and the fulfillment that comes from that isn't as powerful as it should be. And listen, all you nonprofits out there, listen, this is gold nugget right here. If you can provide a meaningful service, a meaningful volunteer experience for your volunteers, that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when your growth and your mission will get carried on. I actually value my volunteer experience as much as I do our mission, because without the volunteers, it doesn't happen, right? I have a Hank story I'll summarize for you. But Hank was an old dude, let's just say that came and volunteered one time at one of our builds, and I put him at the cut station because he had 40 years of carpenter experience. Well, when you're at a build, you kind of forget what's going on because a million people are asking you, because a lot of people that come never touched a drill before, right? Which is awesome. We're teaching them how to do tools and stuff. Well,
Right.
I kind of forgot about Hank, and at the end of the build, and I ran up to him, and he's covered in sawdust, been cutting thousands of boards, right, for 4 hours straight. And I just was like, "Hank, I'm sorry, man. I totally forgot about you. I've been busy, blah, blah, blah." And he kind of looked at me and he put his hands up real serious, like, and I'm like, "Oh, great. Here it comes." Right. He said, "No, Luke, thank you." And I kind of stepped back. I was like, "Thank you? What, are you kidding me?" And he says, "Look, I have volunteered my time at many, many different organizations my whole life, but I've never showed up to an event and in 5 minutes was put on an assignment and I couldn't leave. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't get a glass of water because people were waiting on me." And I was like, "Sorry." And he's like, "No, no, no. Thank you. Thank you for that." And that's when I learned, listen, the happiest volunteers, the sweatiest and the dustiest, because they feel like they actually did something. So don't make your volunteer experience too easy, right? They want to feel like it's a part of it. So community was a big deal. But humans helping humans, that came from the fact that, you know what, I didn't want to be associated with any religion, with any politics. Listen, I'm a farm kid from Idaho, and I wanted everybody to this day still know I'm still just a farm kid from Idaho, right? So there's no excuse that anybody can't do it, right? Because that's who we are. At our core, we're just a bunch of humans, right? And what's beautiful when you get involved, I assume with other charities too, but certainly with Sleeping on the Peace, we're just a family of humans, and that's we hold and stand behind that, because it doesn't matter what you believe, it doesn't matter what you don't believe, or what religion, or certainly what politics you have. There's no place for it in Sleeping on the Peace, and it never comes up because our focus is on someone else. And it's these kids, right? And that's our future. And I tell you what, it's just the greatest environment to be in. You just realize we're just humans helping these little humans. So I live by that. I try to, anyways.
Well, I like that on a number of levels. Like, one, to have that direct impact, right? So when we give money or we volunteer or whatever, maybe a soup kitchen, you can see the direct impact you're having on getting food to people that are in need. Thinking about getting your hands dirty and doing something and feeling productive, and then knowing that the next step is that's going to a kid that needs a bed, which leads to my next piece, which is I do love, and when you reached out to me, I'm like, this is something that transcends politics. We do live in tribal times right now, but I think no one is like, no, I don't want to give kids a bed, because it's like, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? And the fact that it has such a direct impact is such a lovely thing. Now, one of the things I also want to talk about, you and I talked a little bit in the prep here, the good and the bad of success is you start to drift away from the core, right? And so you talk about something called founders syndrome, and I don't think it's a unique phenomena, but it's this feeling of drifting away from the mission you created as it grows. So let's talk about how you're personally navigating that transition and learning to lead through it, because you're not the guy that's like focused on the saw or the putting the beds together, right? You have all these logistical things you have to do as you have these 400 chapters and thousands of beds you're doing.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for asking that question, because it's a very important one. I mean, it's so important, Aaron. People don't realize people commit suicide because of founder syndrome. They don't know that's what it is. They don't know that's what it's called. Because what happens is, and I'll make one small correction. you don't drift away from your mission, right? I think people need to understand you might feel like you are, right? Biggest, hardest thing, there's stages of founder syndrome. The first stage is the build stage where you're building stuff, right? And this is an important stage, right? And it doesn't have to be a founder of a nonprofit. I mean, it could be CEO, it can be just a leadership position that you take on that's brand new. A lot of startup companies experience this because it's up to you and you build this, you put your sweat, blood, tears, whatever into this project and you build it from the ground up, which is awesome. That's what you want to do. That moves into the next stage, which is unavoidable, right? Because it's the corporation that you've built and you start, their identities become fused. It's called identity fusion. So you become one and one becomes you. Like I can tell you right now, 99.9% of the people on the planet that knows Luke Mickelson only knows him because of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, right? There's a few that only know Sleep in Heavenly Peace because of Luke Mickelson. And in the early stages, they were the same person. They were the same company. They were the same identity. That identity fusion is needed. It's not a sign of weakness. It actually is what's needed to keep the organization growing and moving forward. If you don't get that, there's a good chance you're not as committed as you need to be to be successful in your business. So every successful business leader, CEO, founder goes through, unbeknownst to them, this identity fusion. And what the problem is, where founder syndrome becomes an issue, is because each one of those, that corporation and that individual, is going to evolve. We all evolve. We all grow. We learn. Especially an organization. Well, the problem with an organization is it doesn't have any feelings, right? And it evolves much differently than a founder does. And in my case, Sleeping on the Beast evolved so fast, right? I mean, I didn't have a chance to really realize what was going on. All of a sudden, as your organization, and this is the bad thing too. Well, it's a great thing actually, Aaron. Your organization is getting stronger. Governance gets played in. The board shows up. It tightens up. It gets more improvement. You have more leadership structure. You're bringing on more people because it's growing. This is all great things. But what people don't teach a founder or CEO as he's watching his baby, identity fusion, right? His baby grow, that growth now becomes and starts to feel like separation. It starts to feel like disconnect. You're no longer in meetings that you not only normally were in, you're the ones that led it. You're the ones that started it. These are the people you hired and they're not even coming to you. There's problems that happen that you don't jump in and serve anymore, right? This feeling, right, which is extremely hard for people that don't go through this to understand. I tell people it's kind of like, imagine having some illnesses, right? Having some symptoms. You go to the doctor and the doctor goes, "Yeah, we don't know what it is." Well, when you go home, you don't feel very good about it, terrible feeling, frustration, depression. You don't know how to handle it. Blah, blah. Think about it. And that's what founder syndrome does to these founders and CEOs. They go through the third stage, which is called relevance wounds. Relevant. Am I relevant? Am I important? I'm not needed as much. So am I not valued as much? All of these things, it's like a monster. And I refer this to this in my courses. It's a monster that sits there and talks to you. The trouble about this darn monster is the reason why you get validity is because it's you. It's you talking to yourself. It's your voice, right? Luke, yeah, man, that feels like they're pushing you out. Feels like you're being left behind. You don't matter anymore. What? You built it, and it fires you up, And that's where these wounds, these relevance wounds can really cause a founder, CEO, a leader, whoever's going through it, to react poorly. And I feel so bad for these founders that don't have the help to work through this because there's no help out there right now. That's why I wanted to start a course, because you're looking at a guy right here. I started Sleeping on Peace. I love it. It's been my heart and soul from day one. Going through what I didn't know I was going through, this founder syndrome, I could easily be kicked out of SHP down the road if I didn't realize what was going on, even just internally, because you're so emotional about it. And that disconnect feels so personal. And when it is, it's hard to what the third stage is naming the monster. Once you name the monster, for example, once that doctor gives you that diagnosis, now I know what it is, right? Now I can deal with it. Now I can turn and face this monster and begin to shrink it and begin to deal with it and begin to understand it. Because if you don't, and you keep that monster in the closet, it's as big and bad and as ugly as you can ever imagine, you know? So naming that monster, once you get through all of that, now you can actually accept the last role, well, close to the last role anyways, which is identifying what role do I play, and there's 5 roles to a leadership evolution when it comes to a founder. You're a builder, you're an architect, you're an anchor, you're an ambassador, and then the last role is a mentor. And these roles are very, very valuable and mean something to the organization. Because I tell board members and CEOs, listen, when you have a company and a founder that are still working together, that's much more powerful than when they're not. And so both of you need to understand that founder syndrome does affect both of you. It's kind of like having a spouse that has cancer, right? They're going through something you don't understand, but at least you understand they're grumpy right now or they're having a hard time because of not their normal personality, right? So you can sympathize with them. Boards, other executive directors, employees, things of that nature, since they don't understand, and this founder doesn't even understand what they're going through, these reactions can be taken very, very personal, very hard, very defensive, and ultimately hurts the organization. Founder syndrome was very difficult. Thank you for bringing it up because it is one thing that, like child business, let's be honest with you, it's unknown, untalked about, and I'm trying to help those out there that are suffering through it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I think that it is an issue that, it seems like it's a weakness. Like, well, you created this thing. Like, how could you ever not be feeling like you're in your spot or happy or whatever? And so it is nice to be able to help on that other access. I do want to go back to the show that we talked about with Mike Rowe. And what I will tell you about is, again, we found each other. I did some research. I put together the questions. Then I watched the entire show. And so I want to mention one thing before we talk about returning the favor and what that did for your organization. Toward the end of it, and this is a spoiler alert, you go out to deliver the bed, which apparently is partly to take you out of your office so Mike can do his thing with his crew in the background. But you go into this house, and this house is a single mom. I think she has 2 or 3 kids. Kids are like all over you guys hugging, and it was actually very cute. But you take the beds you're taking into what I can only describe as like sort of like the boiler room slash basement. There are, studs on the walls, but like no sheetrock. You can see the exposed wires. And I'm thinking like, I know that people live like this, and I know there are people in the world that live in dirt huts and whatever, but it really sort of brought it home to me. And again, I hail from Maine and I have a lot of family. I came from very, very humble beginnings, but it was kind of shocking. And just the joy that you saw on these kids' faces. And to your point, I think it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the kids immediately, because you bring mattresses and blankets and pillows as well. And the kids immediately get on the bed, and you're like, I know I'm not going to get this kid off the bed for like the next day or
Right.
week or whatever. So that blew me away, by the way. And it was very, very touching and really brought this home. But to the show, right? So Mike Rose stumbles into your life. They find you. They know that you're doing this work. Talk about the fact that beyond the new facility, because they gave you this new, like beautiful new facility, what was the most valuable lesson you learned from this surreal experience?
What's funny? I mean, the warehouse was great. We needed that, but they were a megaphone that we needed the most, right? From that returning the favor, we went from 7 chapters when it aired in February of 2018 to 125 in just like 10 months. I mean, it just was the megaphone. But when you ask about what I learned, this is kind of fun. I don't get to share this as often as I like. Once that airing was done, Mike Rowe jumped on the plane, was gone that night because we had all of our chapter presidents there. From some of them were from Maine and Minnesota. I mean, we are not Maine, Maryland. Anyways, we all went to dinner that night, and Jordan Allen, who is now our executive director, a good buddy of mine, he asked everybody to answer 2 questions. The first question is how did you come to know about Sleep in Heavenly Peace? Because I mean, it was just Jordan and I and my wife and his wife that knew what was going on from the beginning. That was it. That was cool to hear how they came across SHP. But the second question is what I'll never forget. And he asked, what has it done for you personally? And this is what I didn't realize. I mean, I knew what it did for me, But I didn't realize, I don't know why, but I didn't realize what it did for other people. I mean, we're talking about saving marriages, talking about alcoholics that are now, have devoted their life to sleep in heavenly peace and not going down that path. Kids having a better relationship with their parents. I mean, just the involvement of them, again, not focusing on their own problems, but seeing how they can help someone else out. I was not ready for that. Like, I didn't realize it was that emotional. I knew how I felt about it, but it was very comforting and I shouldn't say surprising. Maybe at the time it was, that affected people just as much as it did me. And that was such a neat thing, because I tell people, listen, getting off the couch, answering these tiny moments that call on you to do something and you dismiss it like we all do, too busy, don't know what I'm doing, don't know how to do it, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're realizing that, listen, you get up off the couch, you might not change the world, right? But you might change someone's world. And that someone's world might just be you. And that is beautiful, right? And what a better world to start with than yourself. And that's not a selfish thing, right? When we get ourselves right, that's when we can help really make some damage and helping other people, because we're right with the world. And so I was really appreciative of that moment. I love the show that brought us all together. I mean, the show did so much for us in a lot of scalability talk, but it was the after party, if you will, where a lot of the emotions came together. A lot of people, I mean, it had been 6 years since we started that night happened. A lot of sacrifice went into that, to build it to that point. And we all knew we were just on the edge of a cliff, right? Just ready to get rolling. And sure enough, it went pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, two funny moments just to recap this, and then I have one last question, and then we'll get into some other lighter questions. But you said you have 3 kids, and there was a moment where you go back to the garage to get your sort of like, I don't know, what's called a hero shot, and your garage or your workshop where you had been building had been cleaned out, and Mike is sitting there, and supposedly he had already left town, and your youngest, I believe, is like, "Give us our stuff back. Like, what did you do with it?" And Mike says to you, "I can either bring your stuff back here if you want, or you can see where we went and, brought it and we can go there." And it took a couple of times of saying that. And then your oldest son says, "I think we should go to where Mike has brought our stuff because I think he's started to catch on to what's happening here." So that was a very sweet and cute moment. And anyway, and that's a beautiful message, by the way. I think we forget that these things do have the potential to have this major impact. And just thinking about the alcoholics and people like with family issues, that having that higher purpose, it's part of why I do the show, is pointing out that like having that higher purpose or seeing people that have these higher purposes in their lives really can be transformational. But I do like to give the opportunity for people that are doing this. Where can people go and either get involved by joining a chapter, starting a chapter, donations, spreading the word? But this is your opportunity to pitch the org a little bit.
And I want to thank you for bringing up that moment because, of all that sleep in heavenly peace moment, there was 2 that were really touching to me. One, because I was a dad, and it was that moment. The other one is when there's a part of that when they pull down the American flag and you see
Yeah.
sleep in heavenly peace on a building, that I don't know why it just killed me. But to see and hear my kids defend what we were doing as strongly as my little 3-year-old, well, I guess at that time he'd have been about 6, defend what we were doing. I was so proud of him, just like, give us our stuff back. I mean, he was legitimately upset, which was so
I
cute,
could
right?
tell. Yeah.
And Mike handled it so well. Oh, and that's really what I was really proud of, because as a dad, that's what you want. You're trying to do your best to teach these kids the joy of giving back to others, because in this day and age, in this world, it's all about me, 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 mine, mine, mine. And, as hard as we can as parents to teach that to these kids, it's becoming harder and harder. And so thank you for bringing that up. That was a special moment for me as a dad. Yeah, listen, thank you for having me on, because we need to raise the awareness about sleep in heavenly peace. And if you want to learn more, first place to go to is our website, shpbeds.org. Now, the interesting thing about our website, we've changed it a couple years ago on purpose. You won't come to some big national website. You're going to come to the chapter that's closest to you, their website. And the reason why we did that is because who cares about the national numbers? I mean, they're good, they're big numbers, but what is for me as a farm kid, I want to know what's going on in my own hometown, right? Sure, what's going on in these other hard parts of the world, but what's going on locally? Well, we want you to see that. So you're going to bring up that shpbeds.org. You're going to see how many kids are on the waiting list. You're going to see how many kids they've helped. You're going to see the events that's going on, how many beds they've built. You can get involved. When you donate, 90%, 90 plus percent goes right to that chapter and stays there, right? We pull 10% because I got to turn the lights on, but 90% stays in that chapter. So if you're in California, you donate to your sister's town because she needs help in Los Angeles or Maine or whatever, it goes there. Same for applying for a child. If you know a child, yours, your neighbors, your sister 5 states over, you can apply for that child as a reference, right? If the chapter president has accepted that zip code, they get the application. It's not a first come, first serve. So it's based on need. And so please, that's how we can find these kids. And then lastly, if you're like if this really pulls at you and something you're looking to give back, and honestly, if you want to change in your life and you don't have a chapter near you, you can start a chapter. And we have a robust training program. We put on 50, 60 chapters a year, Aaron. We only lose 1 or 2 typically because they move or, something happens. So we have very little attrition. We train very well. We're high success rate because we know people really want to do this. We take away all the mumbo jumbo BS from administration stuff, and we take that out of your hands. We just want chapter presidents to focus in on raising money, building beds, delivering beds. That's it. After that, we take care of it because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? These chapter presidents are all volunteer. They're working half days, 12-hour days. I'm just kidding. They're working really hard, and we want to make them as easy as possible because getting beds under kids is the most important thing, and having the volunteers in their communities experience what it's like to give a child a bed. Most of the time, their very first one. It's life changing.
Yeah, like I said, all you have to do is watch that episode with Mike Rowe and seeing you guys show up and deliver, and it's like, holy crap. I mean, I'm going to get teary-eyed again doing that. But, well, thank you for that. And so I do encourage people to do that. And one last thing I'll just say as a PSA is you can also take this episode or any of the other podcasts that Luke has done and share those with your networks, right? And just getting the word out there and helping to spread the word is a relatively easy thing you can do from the comfort of your desktop. I do want to move into, we have some lighter questions now that I like to ask all my guests at the end. One of them, and maybe you don't have enough time to do this because you're helping give kids beds. What's a show or podcast that you're currently binging right now? Ideally, something that's on the lighter or funnier side.
Do I have to be honest, Aaron?
You do have to be honest. The more honest, especially if it's a guilty pleasure, those are the ones that we really want.
Well, I'm going to say this out loud. I've never seen Downton Abbey. And so my wife's having me watch Downton Abbey. And I'll tell you what, I love it. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Nothing wrong with you.
It's
given
it's
like what a sort of modern man you are, Luke. It's like it's only fitting that would be the case. So I love your vulnerability on that one. That's exactly what we want to get on the show. Biggest regret.
Oh, I've made a lot of mistakes, I guess. I'm just like everybody else. I think when I look back, I'm a farm kid from Idaho. I'm a sports player. I'm competitive, which means I have this internal cockiness in me to compete and want to win. Which is awesome to have, right? That's why a lot of people are successful because of that. The biggest downside to have that kind of personality, and it's taken me, I'm 48 years old to learn this, that I didn't allow a lot of people's wisdom to land in me. I wish I could go back when I was 20 and say, listen, don't act like you know everything because you don't, and there's other people that know more than you. Allow their wisdom to teach you. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not weakness at all. In fact, it's a way to build relationships with someone. I love helping people. So why wouldn't I want to give them the chance to help me? That's my biggest regret. Had I done that, I thought I'd be far more successful. I'd be far smarter than I am now. And I think I think I would be able to help more people, which is what I want to do had I just allowed more people to help me.
Well, it's a hard one. I never liked feedback myself, and I always thought I was smart enough and could get by. And I had a executive coach, And essentially, one of the most important lessons he taught me was feedback was a gift. And whether you like it or not, or whether it's true or not, perception is reality. And I will say, still, I have my moments where I'm like, I don't really want to hear this, but
Yeah,
it can teach us and we can get a lot further faster. So
sure.
that's a great one. Last one. This is an easy one, or hopefully an easy one. Which band or artist, ideally one that's no longer around, would you have most liked to have seen?
This is a funny one because my parents growing up, they divorced when I was just getting into high school. But before that, it was either my mom was an Eagles fan and my dad was a Beatles fan. So it was Eagles or Beatles, right? And there was always sometimes going on at the same time all the way across the on opposite ends of the house, right? There when you look at both of those bands, probably more Beatles than Eagles. They were genre changing, right? They were music icons and changed the industry. And there's lots of those, right? I loved especially the early Beatles. They would have been a fun group to learn about. I mean, and there's thousands of others obviously, but I like that because my dad was a big Beatles fan. Him and I enjoyed music together, probably maybe more than most of my siblings, and it was like the one bond I had with my dad because he wasn't a sports guy. He never came to any of my games, but he liked to mix tapes back in the day where you record tapes. And
Yep.
yeah, he was big into that. And so it was the one thing we bonded on.
Well, it's very cool, and I will just say personally, my dad and I had that same music bond as well. He was also would throw the ball around with me and whatever, but I still to this day he's no longer with us, but I still fondly remember those days of sharing his albums and the Doors and Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and Paul Simon. So great way to end the interview. Luke, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for what you're doing and all the good you're putting out into the world. And I'm blessed to have been able to have this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you for the mic. Thank you for the speakers and thank you for the ears that are listening. And I hope you walked away learning something new that you share with others. So
Absolutely.